when I work with identity, I need to get a token back from ACS. It's going to send back a token that contains all those claims that have been processed by those rules. I'm going to store that somewhere in my application. The question is, where do you store it? I've got a lot of options. I could put it into a file. I could save it in this page. I could create a variable. The scoping within Silverlight is hierarchical. So if I go up to the application, it contains all the pages. So if I want to share this across multiple pages, I could do that by going out to the application object. So the way you do that is open up your project, go out to your app XAML, and you add your actual code inside of the app XAML. So inside of app XAML, you'll see here's the set of resources that are used throughout the entire environment. I'm going to add an XML namespace for the federation piece to equal that Silverlight phone federation utilities control that we just added. By doing this, then I can add a application resource to make this work and be available. So I'm going to add the resource here, and it's going to be a request security token response store. Give it a key, RSTR store, and now I can reference this same token wherever. And if I capture it from the login page, I can pass it into the main page and be able to use it from wherever. The key thing is that now that that's available, I can reference it within my actual design. So let's go back over to our login page. And what you'll see down here is I've got some properties here. I'm going to set these properties up for this to match out to what I need for my application. So I'm going to go, and I've got some properties here. And let's just copy, cut, and paste them in. What I've got is the assigning control is the name of it. The realm, my RPA, which is the realm that we created for ACS to work with this. I've got my RPA demo, the namespace. And then I've got the store where that's actually going to be stored. And then I have a loaded event that is going to go through and handle that processing of what happens. So I'm going to stub that out, add the loaded event, and then I can right-click and view the code and actually set up what I want to do when this is running. So that added inside of my project, the sign-in control is loaded. Sign-in control loaded is going to have a couple of things I'm going to do. One is I'm going to have wire up a callback event for when that request token conversation ends. And so I'm going to wire up a quick, say, sign in done tab out, and that'll stub out then the actual sign-in code for me. And then I can go ahead. I'm going to call the method to get the security token. That then will initiate the code that goes out and says, okay, well, where's the identity coming from? Am I getting it from Google, whatever? When it's done, I'll have a security token, and I'll check to see, okay, is it valid? Do I have everything I need? Then it'll come down into my sign in done, at which point then I need to navigate back to the main screen. So what happens here is we'll just put this over here and say that if there were no errors in that request security token conversation, then we're going to navigate back to wherever we came from. So we're going to call the navigation service to navigate back to the main page. Now you might ask yourself, well, how do I get to that login thing? When would I do that? Some developers will use like a button or some control, maybe an app bar icon. You click on it, it'll then go out and do the login. Other people will throw it into like when the whole page starts up, just go out and see if we've got a valid token. Are we authenticated? If we aren't, then navigate out to it. That's the way we're going to do it. So I'm going to right click here and just go out and view the code. And I'm going to say, okay, in the constructor, check to see if we've got that login or not. So right after we initialize the component, I'm going to go out and see if I've got a valid token or not. The way that this works is I've got some global variables. One is the request token response store, which is using that Silverlight Phone Federation utilities. And then I've got a class that I'm going to create that's actually going to contain that login info. So I'm going to create a new public class. I'm going to call it login info. Same name as my user info to make that type work. And then I'm going to come out and I'm going to actually work with that inside of our project here. So let's go. And I'm going to say in our constructor, when we come in, I'm going to say that if I don't have a valid request token, security token response. So basically what we've done is created a global for our SDR store, which is using that application resources for our STR store, that one that we created. If that does not contain a valid request security token response, then it calls a navigation service to go out to my login page, right? It'll then go through that login and then come back to this page. It'll come back to this page, and then it will have the valid token, at which point then we're going to say, okay, yes, we do come down, and we're going to do a little bit of work. One is extract the token claims. The other is to go out and load data. Now, I can stub these out by hovering over this, and I can then say, okay, generate the method stub. That gives me my load data. We'll actually do some work here. I get a message box that shows you're logged in. I also have one for extract token claims. If I do a control period, that does the same thing, generates the method stub. And then I can go out and process this. Now, what I want to do is I really like the idea of having something to go out and figure out what's contained inside that token that comes back. And so I sat down and I wrote a bunch of code. I basically ran in debug, took a look at the token that came back, and I realized a couple things. One is it's URL encoded, and it's got a bunch of claims that are attached to whatever. And so if I was to open that up, decode it using the URL decoder in HTTP utility, then I can actually see what's in there. And then each claim is separated by the ampersand sign. So what I did was I said, let's go out and split up those claims. So I have a list of claims. And then for each one of those claims, I check to see if the name in the left part, the first part of that claim, the left part of the equal sign is equal to a set of string, a character string that says name, name identifier, email address, etc. And I pulled the value out of it by saying, okay, we'll pull out the one. The first one is the 0th, so if that's equal to this, then set the value of my user info for each of these things out to these different pieces of claim. Now, I've got the little red squiggly. That means I haven't defined out my user info for name. If I do a control period, I can then generate property stubs for each one of those. Control period. And what you'll see down below is that login info down here generate the code for each one of those different types of properties that I added inside my class. So now what we've got is when the extract token claims finishes, it's going out and it's populating my user info, name ID, with whatever value is in there. So I could say you're logged in and then say plus hello user info dot name. And if we did this correctly, what I should be able to do is go out and run this application. Now, I've got the Windows Azure emulator set up. If I do an F5, it's going to try running the Azure piece here, but I just want to run the client. So I'm going to right-click on this, and I'm going to say, set this as my startup project. And then I'm going to do an F5. And this is going to start up the Windows Azure emulator. And it's going to take a few seconds the first time you do this. After it's done it once, then it'll be actually a lot quicker. But what it's doing is it's going to go out, it's going to build the entire project, make sure everything is going to work. And then it's going to connect up to the Windows Azure or the Windows Phone emulator. Now, I just restarted. It's going to start out from scratch. So it'll start up the emulator. It takes it a few seconds. Creates the application, the Silverlight package, which is a ZAP file that contains all the code that it needs. And then it'll deploy it to the actual emulator and then start up the application and then connect to it remotely through debug so I can see what's going on. So here we've got everything up here. And while that's coming up, I'll just see if there's any questions. And it looks like there aren't any questions so far. But here's our application. It's now starting up. It goes out. First thing it's going to do is it's going to come to the main screen. It's going to realize, do I have a secure token or not? So it shows the splash screen, shows the main page, doesn't have the token, redirects us out to the login page. The login page comes up. And if you've done working with the emulator, you can see I can click on any of these three that we set up. Google Me, Live ID, or Yahoo. If you click on the Google, it'll take you over to where you've got the login experience. I can use this. I could use whatever I want. So here, it's going to come out. I can type in my username. And one of the things that I can do in the emulator is I can press the page up and I can use the keyboard on the computer to actually type it in. It makes it a lot quicker. And what I'm going to do is type that in, and I'll type in my password. And I'll just type the password over here. once I've typed in my password, I can unclick the stay signed in because we're doing demos here. I want to make sure that shows up again. Click on sign in, and it's going to go out and it's going to contact Google, and Google's going to say, do you trust this environment, yes or no? And it says, here's this is a test coming in from wherever. The application is rpa-demo.accesscontrol.windows.net. Google, you need to give them permission to say yes. You can use my identity from Google for that application. So I'm going to go ahead and say allow. And that's going to come back and say, hey, welcome, you're logged in. Hello, Mike Bankovich. Of course, at this point, when I click OK, all we've got is my game. Nothing to do. There's no interface or anything here because we haven't really done anything with the actual game itself. In fact, if I wanted to test other IDs, I couldn't even log out because if I go out, that application value is still there. So if I come back over here and click on RPA client, it's going to open up, but it's going to still be logged in with that because it stored that in the application settings. So boom, comes up and it says, hello, I'm already logged in. So we actually need to do a little bit of work to allow us to log out. The way we can do that is if we go out to our main page XAML, is if you scroll all the way down, not going to explain how XAML all works, but there's this app bar where you can actually comment this stuff and actually create sample code. I've got a snippet of code that I'm going to just pull into my toolbox that already has that. So here's my app bar markup, and I'll just drop that in here. And I'm going to add a click event. The log out click, and what this is going to do is it's basically going to take my markup and it's going to add a icon down here to allow me to log out, and then I can go out and view the code, and it should have added the log out click method, and we're right there. And all we're going to do here is we're just going to go out and say, if you're logged in, show a message box, are you sure you want to log out? And then we set our secure token response is equal to null, and then re-navigate back out to my login page. So if we run this now, what I can see is that the application is going to deploy. Notice it's running a lot faster too, because I'm no longer having to go out and do this from scratch. So when it starts up, it just starts right up, no waiting for it to come together. Goes out because it's already logged in. It knows that I'm already currently logged in, so it should give me that message box. But I can then click on my button, log out. Are you sure you want to log out? Cancel. One of the things to notice is that I've got this little X in there. It's because I don't have the icon loaded in there. We'll add that here in a second. We'll say, okay, go ahead and log out. And when I do log out, then it's going to take me back to the login screen, and then I could log in with a different ID. So for instance, I could go to Live ID. I could go to Yahoo. I could go to whatever providers we've defined and set up. So this is all good. We've got everything set up. Here's my login experience. Now we need to go out and we're going to build out how we're going to run our application to have some information about playing rock, paper, scissors.